like taking photos. Are you are you comfortable taking a
Yes.
photo?
Okay, totally.
Okay, let's do it. And I will share it with you guys.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
We can also take a picture with our flyers so that we can send it to our bulletin.
Yeah, take it to Kristen. Yeah, put it on Facebook. Yeah.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get back started.
Okay. Thank you so much for having us. It is a pleasure and an honor to get to be with you this evening. Yeah. So we're here to talk about early intervention or early supports. And this is focused in on the birth to 3 group. And so we work for the Kindering Center, which we have 4 locations, one in Bellevue, one in Bothell, one in Redmond, and one in Renton. So, and I'm Marcy, and this is Anu. Okay, next, please. Thank you, Sini. Make the disclaimer. So the objectives for our time here is what is early intervention, early supports? How do kiddos get into these services, or how do you find these services? And what is the relationship between these services and the local school districts? And then we're open for questions. Okay, next slide. Okay, so do you want to talk about, yes.
Hi everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
I am Anu Lalan. I'm a Family Resources Coordinator at Kindring Redmond. And I work with kids from birth to 3. So if you look at it, it's an early learning program before school, before a kid reaches 3 years of age. And this is a program as part of the state and federal funding to support kids with disabilities from birth to 3. So we offer evaluations at Kindring, and we get so many referrals. We get referrals even if a kid is having a pre-existing condition before birth, or if a kid is premature, or we get referrals from pediatricians, or through support groups we get parents refer their kids. So we have an intake line, and where you can contact directly. I have some cards there where you can access those. We also have a website where you can refer your child yourself. So at Kindring, we provide so many services. So after the evaluation, based on what the kids' needs are, we provide occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, family support services, vision services, and education services. So these are all, we offer a parent coaching model. So we provide services at a kid's natural environment. It can be home or childcare. So, and based on the recommendations at the evaluation, a kid starts receiving services after we create something called IFSP, which is Individualized Family Service Plan. So this plan can go up until a kid's 3rd birthday. So and every 6 months we keep renewing the plan based on the kids' needs. So closer to the 3rd birthday, we connect families to the school district with a transition meeting, and some families decline it. They don't want to be connected to the school district, and that's okay. So in that case, we also provide some private referrals or referrals to the private clinics in the community. So that's a gist of Kindring services. So like a school district is there for every locality, an early support agency should be there for every locality. And Kindring is one such organization. We serve specific geographical area, and Marcy mentioned the area, the campuses that we have. But there are other organizations like Northwest Center, Children's Therapy Center, Encompass. So all those serve different localities. But this is what we do at Kindring. And now Marcy will talk about the Part B services, or school district services, which is from 3 to 21 years of age.
Next slide. So Anu spoke a little bit about that the what happens is a school district is mandated to work with children when it comes up that they have a disability. So we help out with that birth to 3 end of things. And then at the age of 3, the school district then has the resources and or the ability to, please correct me if I'm wrong, to take the children from the birth to 3 program to the school district and to supply those supports. I have put in here some other things. So PAVE is an organization that helps families also. It's a private organization, and so if you're having some things going on and you didn't get to you guys, then WA is another resource. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is Part B services, and so these are the things that that the federal qualifying categories. So if the child has any of these things, then they automatically get these services. They automatically are part of the services. So things like an autism diagnosis. You want to say something?
Just that if they're diagnosed, might not necessarily.
Right. So yeah, so depending on the school district, if they get a diagnosis, then they get services, but they might not get the extended services. They still have to qualify for the school district, and each school district has its own, did I say it right?
They'll do the evaluation, we'll share.
Yes.
They'll do the evaluation to determine, one, does the student have a disability? And then the other thing that they're really looking for is, does that disability impact the student's education? Because having a disability, it might and it might not, right? So they'll check to see if there's a disability and then see if it's impacting.
Right, yeah. So, okay, next slide. So at Kindering, we are able to do diagnosis at Kindering. We have a medical director that comes through, comes to our location twice a month, giving kids diagnosis if that is what is appropriate. So this is a picture of some students at Bellevue College, and my son Tom, the one in the middle with the mustache, the big tall one, that is my son Tom, and he's 27 years old, and he took part in early supports. And so as a parent, it's been quite the journey. And I'm just so very thankful and grateful for the people that have come alongside me. Yeah. He really uses his gifts and talents, and that's the way he says, these are my gifts and talents. And it was a place that I first learned the alphabet soup. So I don't know if you have caught in the way that we have talked here, but oftentimes there are acronyms for things like ASD, IEP, these kinds of things. And so we lovingly call that alphabet soup. So that's an important vocabulary to have. So I'm going to pass it over to Anu.
I am now going to share a personal story with you. I haven't shared this with anyone else other than Marcy. So you have the privilege to hear that from me, I would say. So this is my family, and the one... Oh. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So this is my family, and this is my uncle, my mother's younger brother, he didn't have a proper diagnosis of autism, but that's what everyone used to say. So I would like to believe it, and if I look at it now, I think he was autistic. So from what I heard from my parents, my relatives, my grandmother, he was the cutest baby who was born in the family, had very sharp features, and no one expected him to have a developmental delay. His milestones were really late. He was not even rolling over at the age of 2. So that's when they kind of suspected that something was wrong and took him to a general practitioner there back in India. And they said that he is going to be delayed with so many milestones. But that's so much that I know right now. But he did not receive any kind of support, or that the system there is different and no such programs are there. So he did not receive any kind of support. But what I remember about him was he was very sweet with everyone. He had he was handy with electronic items. He had some carpentry skills which he used to engage himself with. He needed help with shaving, and his siblings used to help him with that. But the only thing that I kind of remember is he couldn't speak. He used his own language, and only his immediate family members could understand that. He passed away in October 2010 in his early 40s due to cardiac arrest, but until then he couldn't have a proper communication other than what he knows, right? So now it's 12 years since he passed away, and it's 12 years, 2 days after his, it's day before yesterday was his death anniversary, 12th death anniversary. So when I'm here talking to you about him, I think it's universe that came together for me to share this story with a bigger community, to access the services that you have around you, right? And he didn't receive any such support or service. He couldn't have a proper schooling or any such support. So we have all the facilities here, and we are blessed to have all this around us. So with that thought, I would like to wrap up my presentation. And it was lovely to meet you all, and it was a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was a really touching story, and I feel like couldn't have been more appropriate for this setting. Thank you for trusting us. I think that wraps up everybody's individual presentations. Our goal was to keep it fairly brief because we really wanted to hear from you and answer your specific questions. So I have only one note card, but we're happy to pass the mic around. So raise your hand if you have any questions. For the recording.
I joined the program very late. Is there any way where I can get the slides, details to email or somewhere?
Yeah, I'll give you a note card. You can give us your email and we can send you all the resources.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'll read the note card out loud that we received. The question is, when school's dismissing a child every week, many days, what can be a support for the parents?
There's a lot of people here who can answer that question. This is one of the things I'm super passionate about because I was the parent whose kid was being sent home from school. Our kids are entitled to be at school. That's the most important thing to know. We don't have to go get them when they call us and ask them to come pick them up. And in fact, I encourage you to not and repeatedly go get them. If your child is being sent home or they're wanting to send your child home, I'd call for an IEP meeting pretty quickly and ask for what's called a functional behavior assessment. Ask them to evaluate your child in the area of behavior and to create a behavior plan. And if a behavior plan is a good one and it's working and they're doing what your child needs, the phone calls and the being sent home theoretically should stop. And if they don't stop, then another meeting is in order. So that's the advice I would give. Functional behavior assessment and a behavior plan with the IEP team. Do you guys agree?
I would also ask them, is this a disciplinary action that's taking place here? I can shout. I can definitely shout.
You need the microphone.
Oh, live stream. Yeah. Yes. Okay. One question to ask is just, is my student being disciplined? So when they're saying, come pick them up, or if they're being isolated another way, ask that question, is this a disciplinary action? And make sure that it's being also noted as such as well. But I would definitely agree with what Rachel shared about if the student has an IEP, calling an IEP team meeting, because what's happening is time away from schooling that, as Rachel shared, they have a legal right to.
I don't have any more. Oh, Jim does.
It's such a common issue, and I think a lot of parents are they get the call and they just come and pick them up. And I think kind of what we were just talking about, what I recommend to parents is going to the office and saying, you're suspending my child, right? This is going on the record, because there are rules around how many times that a child can get suspended within a year. And if that suspension is related to the child's disability, then that is absolutely against the law. So we want to make sure that this is, that you're understanding that you have rights and how to advocate. And lots of times this will happen where a school will just say, oh, you got to come pick them up, they're having a problem, but they don't put it's not on the record. So just kind of formalize it, because then there are rules that have to be followed by the schools.
I'll just keep reading off the note cards. We have a couple more questions. The next one is related. It says, do families have to tell centers and schools about the child's challenges/diagnosis? Can the school refuse the child on that ground? Who wants to take this?
The school cannot turn your child away because of a private school. Yeah, I think maybe not based on a disability, I don't know, but they could easily say, we can't serve your child here. They're not bound by the same laws that public schools are, unfortunately. You're not required, at least in public school, to share any diagnosis or any medical information, although I encourage you to. I think it can be helpful if the team really has a full picture of what's going on with your kid.
It's going to be the end of it. The other... Sorry. The other thing too that I would add is there is also like dual enrollment, right? So say like the student is enrolled in a private school, but then checking in with the district where you live to see, so if they're attending this private school and they're determined eligible for services after an evaluation, then looking at dual enrollment. So they would be at the private school, but would be getting related services if they were determined eligible.
It's related in a way, like I've been in like situation where I was working with families who have been like given a diagnosis by a professional like a provider, but the school district evaluation is determining different kind of, like as my friend shared also, like sometimes a disability is there, but the school district would say it doesn't impact learning. So this student might not need like a special education, an IEP or 504 plan. Yeah.
So I agree with what my friend here said, but the school district actually looks for a significant delay to and to see if that affects their learning. So that's the reason why, even if there's a diagnosis, they evaluate in the not all the areas that affects a kid's learning is being evaluated. So only the specific areas that is concerning can be evaluated. So I think that's where that comes from.
And in some cases also, like if the child is speaking different language and they came like newly to the country, and I've seen this, like it takes years, like 2 or 3 years, just because, you know, the school district would say, okay, maybe this is because of the, like, the child is not exposed to English. Or maybe because, you know, it might be like ELL services can resolve the issue. It might be the language, or it might be the, you know, exposure to school or education in general. Some kids who haven't been like to school in refugee camps or different. So I mean, like there are so many challenges in terms of evaluation.
And the only other thing too that I would add, I think this is a safer way to hold this at this point, is there is a timeline that school districts are supposed to follow. So for example, if you, and definitely always do it in writing, if you in writing request an evaluation to see if the student is eligible for special education supports or for a 504, specifically with an IEP, there is a timeline that follows. So you submit it in writing. After the school district receives that, they have to get back within 25 days. And if they say, yes, we're going to evaluate, they have to do that within 35 days. So I would just say definitely do it in writing. And if there is messaging that was just being shared, like, oh, we may think it's a language barrier and not a disability, you can still request, though, if you think that there might be some special education or related services that might be needed. So just know that there is a timeline, and always good to do it in writing so that it can start that timeline.
There is like, and somehow there is a lot of discrimination because of they are like Muslim, and when the family who have autism children, they do not give him the right evaluation, whereas the mother and father, they do not get benefit, and also the children. So in this case, what the family they do, where they supposed to be file a complaint?
I may start like with, you know, in this case, I believe that's why this team is here, like seek an advocate. That's my first advice, be with an advocate. And kind of like to clarify the idea is like when you drive, the closest people next to you, you don't see them in the blind spot. And, you know, in this new car technologies, they have these sensors, you know, and they tell you like they're next to you, like you have a, like you are working with a parent that's exactly close to you, and your goal, your ways, both of you, is to serve the child. And I think, you know, we play that sensor role, you know, like we tell the provider, here is a parent who is concerned about their kids, and, you know, sometimes a professional might not know, like we know that we don't know everything. And that's why we working together with advocates in this team, might bring a different result. That's just a starting point that I would suggest.
I think that's fantastic, and I would echo that. And I think also, I think it depends. So if it is related to special education and say you requested an evaluation and you've heard nothing, or there's some sort of issue happening with that process, there are specific formal dispute resolution options available that's specific to special education. So one of them is, if we're talking formal, right? One of them is a special education community complaint through the state superintendent's office. Another one, might be due process if there are concerns around an IEP. So I think it depends on the specifics of what's going on, but as my friend here just shared, reach out and we can brainstorm, we can hear kind of the full story and then offer what might be some great next steps with that.
Thank you. The next question says, from the teacher's point of view, how do we help parents access services if they're not ready to accept a potential diagnosis?
Such a good question, and everyone has a different level of readiness, right? And as parents, this is hard news to hear and accept, right? And I think as a teacher, and I've worked on diagnostic teams at Seattle Children's and at UW, pushing the diagnosis and pushing that, all right, this child might have autism, can really make families go in the other direction. So try to think about what you can agree on, right? If you can find some shared agreement on, all right, well, we can agree that his language is not where it ought to be, right? He's learning different than your other children, right? And then that can lead to the evaluation and get the services. The diagnosis is not as important as getting started, right? And getting into those early intervention services, getting into the school-based services, and then over time, hopefully that family is going to become more ready. And I think that your job is to try to focus on the child, but also read the parents and where they are.
And I just would encourage you to remember that you are your child's first and primary teacher. So when I was at the early starts of this journey, my son didn't get his diagnosis till he was 7. And the school district was pushing me in a way that I didn't want to be pushed. And I put my foot down and I said, no, this is my child. So, when parents are ready, parents are ready. And an autism diagnosis is not like a strep test. When you have strep, you get swabbed and they send it off to the lab and say, yep. So it's not that way. It is a team effort. It truly is. So, yeah, I'm all about parents having that say, and it's really, really important.
The other thing I would add too is I think opportunities like the one that we're having right now, all of us together here, can be great to kind of bridge community. And I think underlying, right, and this is something that culturally in my community, we're still getting comfortable talking about disability, right? And I personally had an IEP growing up, all the way from kindergarten to 12th grade. And I think, again, opportunities like this are really helpful because it can provide an opportunity for parents to see, like, okay, my student is disabled or my student had to have an IEP in K-12. Because I think the underlying concern, and I'm going to default to the parents in the room on this, is what's going to become of my child when they're older. I feel like that's what I hear the most in community. And so, again, making those connections, understanding that the school system, employment was not designed for disabled people, but that there are opportunities, and the way to kind of minimize, mitigate, to kind of help with that fear of what's going to happen when they're older is to explore all the opportunities that there are out there and to make those connections with other people.
My message is for all of you. If you have a children who have ADHD or autism, I believe you are the one who is responsible about to advocate for him. First and second, you have to teach him how he protect himself, because mostly the people who have ADHD and autism, they will be get sexually abused. And when they get sexually abused, they are from first hand, they are either friend or relative or closer family. So best be attention and be always try to teach them. And if you're willing to have like some kind of workshop, our organization probably happy to assist you with kind of like this kind of like workshop to teach you how you try to help your children protect himself from stranger or from friends. Thank you.
Yeah. In terms of like, denial, I think this is like the first step, like every parent when they hear about the labels, and it's scary. Like the labels are scary, so we tend to reject. And to me, I think I've been to meetings where parents, they go to the IEP or 504 plans. They don't know about special education, or that they don't know the name of the IEP, even the label IEP, but they go there because when I ask them, they answer like, it's my child meeting. And that's the thing, if I am a teacher, I would highlight the services that will be presented to the child, the benefits of the programs, rather than speaking first about the labels, because like we don't really like, especially in certain cultures where like stigma and all of these kind of social codes that it make it really stressful for parents to just to hear about the labels. So I would suggest partnering with someone in the community, or just ask the parents, whoever who is close to them, who might be able to come to a meeting at the school and just explore some ideas and thoughts about the benefits of these programs, how the child would be supported, and what's the outcome of these programs. I think if we flip the narrative, we start with these outcomes, then we come by the end of the discussion to the labels, it would be easier and more convincing. Yeah.
So if you don't mind, could you please talk briefly about some of the early signs of autism?
I guess that was a good one for me. So, so the earliest signs when we're thinking about, say, a child who's about one or 1.5, 18 months, delayed language, delayed communication. And when we think about language, we're not just talking about, or communication, we're not talking about just saying words, but how do you communicate using your gestures, your eyes, your facial expressions, how you understand what is said, as well as what is how you communicate. And we look for kids to communicate for different reasons, not just to kind of get what you want. And you can see kids who I'm going to take your hand and I'm going to make you in and bring you over here, or I might start pointing. But that's communication, right? A lot of children with autism really are delayed in that, or do it in a different way, right? Like that, I'm going to lead you and bring you places, or I'm going to take your hand and place it on an object. There's a concept called joint attention, which is really just about how do we share attention, right? If I look over there, you kind of naturally know to look over to where I'm looking. And that is another early sign that if your child doesn't do that, you have a hard time getting them to look at something that is, kind of by pointing or by looking over there. These are things that children, typically developing children, can do by 10 months, 12 months of age. And that's an earliest social skill, if you really think about what social skills are. And then you look for some of the early pretending, the early symbolic, by like, I'm going to pretend that this is an airplane, or I'm going to imitate what you do, right? Imitation is another thing that we want to look for. So, and finally, I would say just those social games that are typical for children, right? Yeah, peekaboo. I'm gonna play with you. I'm gonna surprise you. Do they like that? Do they want it? Do they do things to continue that, or is it kind of just responsive, or they're doing their own thing? They feel like you feel like they'd rather be by themselves, and you play, and they go and do and will just want to be alone. And I think this is as parents. We kind of look at that and say, oh, well, they're fine just by themselves, right? So it ends up becoming this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, I suppose, where all right, well, I'm not going to bother them, and they are off doing their own thing, and we think, oh, aren't they great at playing by themselves? And then later you realize, wow, it's really hard to engage with them. It's really hard to interact with them. They only do things on their own terms. So that's the quick answer. I could talk about that for 2 hours. Yes, I think that. In fact, we have research to show that exposure to language is better for the brain and better for communication. It is one of the myths that you shouldn't expose your child to 2 different languages. But that said, a lot of children will, kind of like what Mohammed was saying, it will pick a language, right? And often will pick English because that's the one that they're most exposed to. So it is not uncommon for a child to understand, say, Arabic, but always respond in English, right? And as a speech language pathologist, I kind of suggest go with what is working, go with what is your follow your child's lead, but do not listen to the person who says, oh, well, you should only speak English to your child, because we know that's not accurate.
So in that case, like when you expose them to 2 different languages, it may cause like a speech delay.
You would expect them to be a little delayed. Most bilingual children are delayed if you compare them to a single language person, a child.
But I think Marcy's point was there's a difference between a child who's a late talker because they're bilingual and a child who's a late talker because they're autistic. And
Right. Yeah. Thank you for understanding Marcy better than me. So, did you want to ask something?
So there is a lot of sign they will flipping the hand always when they are so excited, or they jumping, or they open their mouth. So you see some sign which is like the normal child, or I can say the one who they do not have ADHD or autism, they do not do it. And also when you try to give them 2 order, they will just pick one. So they are not bad listening, no, but they focus only with one task only. And there is some taster, they don't like it. Like cheese, could be some stuff which is soft, they do not like it. And mostly they are delayed by talking. And sometimes, I'm not sure about this because I'm not doctor, but I work closely with the autism, and they have like, they do not speak. And they have maybe by the age of 3 or maybe more. Some people, they use the machine only. So, but only you can work with them, it will be helpful. If you work with them with some kind of toy, I brought it here, I can show you. So they like something like this, so they can be touch it and it will be kind of connected with their brain, so it will be help them with the stress. And some other, which is this, it's also helpful for the autism. And it's all about developing their brain and that one also. And you can always try to avoid the chocolate. I'm sorry, I put chocolate here just like for that. But you can avoid chocolate because it's giving them more energy. And also there is some other stuff where their brain can work. You can speak with them like some kind of like storytelling and try to show them. So their brain can work more than doing some stuff. And also depend of the child to other child. Thank you.
I think that was a great example of you know, a profile that you see. And I think that what we also got to remember is that there's a wide variability. And there is a saying, if you probably haven't heard it, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and that speaks every single one of you probably has. If you have a child with autism, your child is different than your child, is different than your child, is different than your child. And that is typical in autism. That's why they call it the autism spectrum. So you're absolutely right. Those are signs that we see in some children with autism, but not every child with autism is going to flap their hands. Not every child with autism is going to need a fidget toy, but many do. And I think that's why it's hard when when Marcy was saying, I think it was Marcy, about there's no test, right? You can't do a throat swab, you can't do a blood test, you can't take a picture of the brain and say, oh yeah, there's the autism, right? It's just not. It's us observing behavior, and how does their behavior, how do their symptoms manifest themselves in their behavior? It depends on their personality, it depends on their temperament, it depends on the genetics, right? It depends on you and your family and how you raise them, right? So there's so much that goes into it. So it's a hard question, right, for us to be able to answer.
But it's not the mom's fault.
It is not your fault. It is not the mom's fault. It's not the parents' fault. That we want to make sure that everybody knows that nothing that you did caused autism, right? And you can do a lot to help your child in their development.
Thank you. It's 9 p.m., so I just wanted to be cognizant of the time. I know it's late, so if you have to head out, please do so. Don't feel shy. I know there's one question we didn't get to. Feel free. I think some of us may be able to hang out a few more minutes, so feel free to talk to us directly or leave us your email addresses, and we can follow up with you over email. Thank you.
Nice job.